My name is Violet. I am 33 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the youngest and the only daughter of the Carter family. In the world outside, people see us as the Carters of Manhattan, the family with the glass tower on Park Avenue, the ones whose name is engraved on hospital wings and university libraries. My father, Leonard Carter, is a real estate legend, the kind of man who built a $300 million empire from nothing but grit and vision. My mother, elegant and inscrutable, hosts charity galas and sits on the boards of 3 museums. My 2 older brothers, Matthew and James, both Harvard MBAs, run the family investment portfolio and are always in the news for closing deals that most people can't even imagine. And then there's me, Violet, the creative one, the artist with an MBA, as my father likes to say, always with a half smile that never quite reaches his eyes. I manage our family's tech startup division, a role I fought for, and one that even now feels like a consolation prize. At family dinners, I am the one who brings up new ideas, only to watch them float away, ignored, or politely dismissed. My brothers talk numbers, asset growth, market share, the latest acquisition in Miami. I listen, nod, and sometimes try to interject, but my voice is always softer, less certain. I have learned to measure my words to anticipate the raised eyebrows and the quick, practiced way my brothers steer the conversation back to serious business. Sometimes I wonder if I was born into the wrong story. The Carters have always believed in legacy, in passing the torch from father to son. When I was a child, I used to sit at the top of the stairs and listen to my father talk to Matthew and James about the future of the family. I remember the pride in his voice, the way he would pat their shoulders and say, "One day, this will all be yours." I never heard those words directed at me. Instead, I got ballet lessons and art classes, and the gentle suggestion that girls have different strengths. Even when I graduated top of my class at Wharton, it was Matthew who got the congratulatory call from the board, not me. The truth is, I have spent most of my adult life trying to prove that I belong at the table. I work harder, stay later, and take on projects no one else wants. I was the one who pitched the idea for our tech venture, the one who built the prototype that brought in our first $40 million in revenue. But even now, with numbers on my side, I feel like an outsider in my own family. My brothers joke that I'm the wild card, the one who might just run off and start a nonprofit or disappear to Bali. They say it with affection, but underneath there's a current of doubt, a sense that I am not quite reliable, not quite Carter material. The pressure to live up to the Carter name is relentless. Every decision feels like a test, every misstep, a confirmation of their doubts. My father is a man who believes in order, in tradition, in the steady hand of experience. He loves me. I know that, but he cannot see me as his equal. My mother, for all her warmth, is a master of gentle redirection. "Violet, darling, why don't you let your brothers handle this one?" she'll say, her voice soft but firm. I have learned to smile, to step aside, to swallow the sting of being overlooked. And yet I cannot let go of the hope that one day I will be seen not just as the Carter daughter, but as a leader in my own right. Sometimes late at night, I lie awake and replay the last board meeting in my mind. My father's voice, calm and measured. "Violet, you're creative, but this is serious business." I remember the way the room went quiet, the way my brothers exchanged glances. In that moment, I felt invisible, reduced to a footnote in a story I have spent my whole life trying to rewrite. This is where my story begins, in the shadow of legacy, fighting for a place in a family that measures worth in millions and expects its daughters to know their place. I am Violet, and I am tired of being underestimated. The turning point came not on my birthday, but at a place where I should have felt safest, my brother Matthew's wedding. It was the kind of event that made headlines. The Carters had spared no expense. 500 guests, a rooftop ballroom at the plaza, white orchids flown in from Thailand, a string quartet from Vienna, and a guest list that read like the society pages. The final bill I would later overhear was just over $27 million. I had spent weeks helping to plan the wedding, fielding calls from the event planner, smoothing over last-minute crises, and even wiring $50,000 of my own savings to cover a deposit when the florist threatened to walk. It was exhausting, but I told myself it was worth it to be part of the family, to show them I could handle pressure, logistics, and responsibility. I even designed a custom wedding app as my gift to Matthew and his bride Claire, a platform to coordinate seating dietary needs and real-time updates for the guests. The app was a hit, saving the day when a storm delayed the arrival of the wedding cake. But on the night itself, I felt like an afterthought. My name wasn't on the main program, though I had been promised a mention as event co-chair. I was seated at table 17, far from the head table, tucked between distant cousins and a business partner's wife who barely spoke to me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just an oversight, but the sting was real. The real blow came during the speeches. Claire Radiant and Vera Wang took the microphone to thank everyone who made this day possible. She named my brothers, my parents, even her college roommate who had flown in from Paris. When she reached my name, she paused and smiled, her voice sweet but edged with something sharp. And of course, Violet, thank you for the tech stuff and for being so flexible with everything. We couldn't have done it without your unique talents. There was polite laughter. I felt my cheeks burn. The word flexible hung in the air, a backhanded compliment that everyone seemed to understand except me. I glanced at my mother, who gave me a tight, apologetic smile. After the speeches, I retreated to the balcony, desperate for air. My phone buzzed with a notification from the wedding app, a reminder to cue the fireworks. I watched the city lights blur through tears I refused to let fall. That's when I overheard Matthew and James talking just inside the French doors. Their voices were low, but I caught enough. "She doesn't need to know. James said it's cleaner this way. Dad signed off. The trust is locked." Matthew sighed. "She'll find out eventually. She's not stupid." "By then it's done. The $120 million is for contributors only. She's got her own projects." My heart pounded. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. The trust. The family's liquid assets. I had always assumed I was included, just like my brothers. I had worked for years, built the tech division, brought in $40 million in new revenue. I had invested my own money, my own time, and now they were cutting me out. Later that night, unable to sleep, I slipped into my father's study. The house was quiet. The party long over, I found the file in his desk drawer, thick with legal documents. There in blue ink was the amendment. Successor rights limited to direct contributors. My name, Violet Carter, was crossed out. The signatures, my father's, Matthew's, James's, were all there. The date was last month. I stared at the paper, my hands shaking. The room seemed to tilt. All those years, all those late nights, and I was still just the flexible one, the helper, the outsider. I felt anger, humiliation, and a cold, hollow ache in my chest. My phone vibrated. It was my mother. "Honey, don't take it personally. They're just worried about risk. You know how the board is." I couldn't answer. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to demand an explanation. But all I could do was sit there, clutching the paper, feeling the weight of every time I had been told to step aside to let the men handle things. The betrayal was complete. In that moment, I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how much money I brought in, I would never be enough for them. Not as a Carter, not as a daughter, not as myself. I left the wedding before the last song played, slipping out through the service elevator while the band was still playing New York. New York. My dress felt too tight, my shoes pinched, but mostly it was my chest that hurt and ached, that seemed to press down on my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just walked out into the night, the city lights blurring as I tried to hold myself together. The ride home was a blur. I remember staring out the window of the cab, watching the rain streak down the glass, feeling numb and raw at the same time. My mind kept circling back to the trust document. My name crossed out in blue ink. Successor rights limited to direct contributors. The phrase repeated in my head like a cruel mantra. After everything I'd done, after years of working twice as hard to prove myself, I was still just the kid sister, the helper. The one who was always expected to step aside. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation with my brothers, every moment I'd been told to be flexible, or let the men handle it. I thought about the time years ago, when I'd pitched my idea for the tech division to my father. He'd smiled, patted my hand and told me it was a cute idea. I'd spent months building the prototype, working late into the night, only to have Matthew present it to the board as if it were his own. I remembered the way the board members congratulated him, their voices full of pride, while I sat quietly at the end of the table, invisible. There were other moments too. The time James forgot to include me in the family group photo at the company's anniversary gala. The time my mother gently suggested I wear something less bold to a shareholder meeting, so I wouldn't distract from the business at hand. The countless times I'd been asked to take notes, to fetch coffee, to help out behind the scenes, while my brothers took center stage. Now, sitting alone in my apartment, the city humming outside my window, I felt something inside me snap. I was tired of being overlooked, tired of being used, tired of pretending that it didn't matter. My anger simmered just beneath the surface, sharp and hot. But underneath it was something called a disappointment, not just in them but in myself. For all my ambition, all my hard work, I had still let myself believe that if I just did enough, if I just proved myself one more time, they would finally see me. But they never would, not really. The next morning I turned off my phone and ignored the dozens of messages from family members, most of them asking where I'd gone, a few from my mother saying she hoped I was feeling better. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I needed space, and for the first time in my life, I was willing to take it. I sat at my desk, staring at the financial dashboard for the family's tech project, the one I had built from scratch, the one that had brought in $40 million in new revenue. My name was on every contract, every code commit, every investor update. I thought about the $25 million in seed funding I had contributed from my own savings money. I had earned consulting for other startups, money I had put on the line because I believed in the vision, and now I was being cut out, erased. My hands shook as I logged into the joint account. I stared at the numbers for a long time, my finger hovering over the withdraw button. It felt like a line in the sand, a point of no return. If I took my money out, I would be making a statement, a declaration that I was finished being used, finished being taken for granted. I pressed the button. The funds transferred back into my personal account with a soft chime. It was done. I sat back, breathing hard, my heart pounding. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. What would they say when they noticed? Would they even care? Would they finally realize how much I had contributed? Or would they just move on, find someone else to do the work I'd done in silence for years? I spent the next few days in a kind of fog, moving through my apartment like a ghost. I stopped answering emails from the family office. I let calls from my brothers go to voicemail. I cancelled meetings, let deadlines slip. It felt reckless, but also necessary. For so long, I had been the reliable one, the fixer, the person everyone could count on to pick up the slack. Now I was done. At night, I started journaling, pouring out my anger and confusion onto the page. Sometimes I wrote for hours, my pen moving furiously as I tried to make sense of what had happened. Is my worth really just a line item on a spreadsheet? How many times do I have to prove myself before they see me? What would happen if I just walked away? The questions haunted me. I thought about my responsibility to the family, the legacy my father had built, the pressure to keep the Carter name untarnished. But I also thought about my own dignity, my own dreams. For years I had told myself that family came first, that I owed it to my father, to my brothers, to be the peacemaker, the team player. But what about what I owed myself? I remembered the little girl I used to be, sitting at the top of the stairs listening to my father talk about the future. I remembered the way I used to dream, not just of being included but of leading, of building something of my own. Somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of that dream, buried it under layers of compromise and self-doubt. Now the pain of betrayal was forcing me to look at my life with new eyes. I could keep playing the role they had written for me, or I could finally step into the light and claim my own story. The choice terrified me, but for the first time it also felt possible. I closed my journal and looked out at the city, alive and glittering beneath the night sky. Somewhere out there, people were building empires, taking risks, making their own rules. Why couldn't I do the same? I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing: I was done, waiting for permission to be seen. If my family couldn't recognize my worth, I would have to find it for myself, even if it meant walking away from everything I had ever known. And so, in the quiet of my apartment, I made a promise to myself. No more shrinking, no more silence, no more settling for less. Let them see what happens when the kid's sister stops playing by their rules. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, embossed in gold foil, Forbes Women's Summit, honoring visionary leaders in tech. My face stared back at me from the cover of the event brochure. My AI platform Novamind listed as a finalist for Breakthrough Innovation of the Year, the kicker. The keynote speaker was none other than my father, Leonard Carter, receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. The universe, it seemed, had a vicious sense of humor. I hadn't spoken to my family in 6 months. Not since I'd withdrawn my $25 million from the joint account, frozen my work on their projects, and poured every waking hour into Novamind. Now, with a $75 million Series B investment from Silicon Valley's top VC firm and a valuation soaring past $200 million, the industry was paying attention. But my family, they'd gone radio silent until today. My phone buzzed as I stepped out of the car at the summit venue. A text from Matthew. "We need to talk. Let's meet after the awards." I didn't reply. The ballroom was a sea of power suits and champagne flutes. I wore a crimson gown, a deliberate contrast to the muted tones of the Carter family uniform. From across the room, I spotted my father surrounded by admirers, his laugh booming as he gestured with a tumbler of whiskey. My brothers hovered nearby, their eyes darting toward me, but never quite meeting my gaze. The ceremony began. My father took the stage first, accepting his award with the polished charm of a man who'd rehearsed humility. "Legacy isn't built alone," he said, nodding toward my brothers in the front row. "It's a family effort." The audience applauded, my chest tightened. Then came my category, the host. A sharp-tongued tech journalist grinned as she read the nominees. When she announced Novamind, the screen behind her lit up with a demo of our AI revolutionizing supply chain, logistics for Fortune 500 companies, including Carter Enterprises' biggest client, Stratus Corp. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father's smile froze. And the winner is Violet Carter and Novamind. The applause was deafening. I climbed the steps, my heels steady, my hands cold. At the podium, I gripped the mic and looked out at the sea of faces, including my family's, pale and rigid. 2 years ago, I pitched an idea to streamline enterprise logistics using AI. My father told me it was too ambitious. My brothers said it was distracting from core business. So I built it myself. A nervous laugh flickered through the room. My father's knuckles whitened around his glass. "Last month, Novamind secured a partnership with Stratus Corp," I continued. The screen behind me flashed a headline, $150 million deal with Stratus, propels Novamind to unicorn status. Gasps erupted. My brothers leaned forward, their eyes glued to the numbers. Stratus had been my family's client for decades, a $40 million annual revenue stream. Now they'd chosen me. "But this isn't just about money," I said, voice softening. "It's about believing in your own worth even when others don't." The room fell silent. I glanced at my father. For the first time, he looked small. The plot twist came during the Q&A. The journalist moderator, smelling blood, turned to my father, Mr. Carter, as a champion of legacy. "What do you think of your daughter's success?" He hesitated, his smile strained. "Violet's always been inventive, but true legacy requires collaboration. Family." Before he could finish, the screen behind him lit up again, this time with a leaked email. The audience gasped. From Leonard Carter to Board of Directors. Date 8 months ago. Violet's project is a liability. Redirect her funding to Matthew's acquisition team. Let her focus on creative endeavors. The room erupted, cameras flashed. My father paled, his lifetime achievement plaque slipping from his hand. I hadn't leaked the email later. I'd learn it was a junior analyst at Stratus furious to discover the Carters had tried to sabotage the tool, saving their company $20 million annually. But in that moment, I just watched stunned as the truth gutted my family's facade. My brother James stormed toward me backstage, his voice a hiss. "You planned this to humiliate us." I stepped closer, my voice steady. You did that yourselves when you crossed me out of the trust, when you treated me like a footnote. Matthew appeared uncharacteristically quiet. We need you back, Vi. The board's panicking. Stratus is threatening to pull all contracts unless you're involved. I laughed sharp and bitter. You didn't want me when I was begging for a seat at the table. Why now? Because you're worth $200 million, he snapped, then flinched, realizing his mistake. The words hung between us, a confession. My value finally quantified, but not in the way I'd hoped. Later at the after-party, my mother found me on the terrace. Her pearls gleamed in the moonlight, but her eyes were tired. Your father, he's proud. You know, he just doesn't know how to say it. I sipped my champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. Funny he knew how to put it in writing. She winced. We thought we were protecting you. The business world, it's brutal. So am I said quietly. Below us, the city glittered, a kingdom of my own making. I thought of the little girl on the stairs listening to her brothers inherit the world. She'd have loved this view. What happens now? My mother asked. I turned, my dress swirling like liquid fire. That's up to you, but I'm done waiting for an invitation. As I walked away, I heard my father's voice behind me, unsteady but urgent. Violet, wait. I didn't stop. The next morning, the headlines said it all. Carter heiress upends dynasty, is family legacy obsolete. 200 million else AI Wonder Woman. Humiliates billionaire dad at Forbes Summit. Stratus. CEO Violet Carter's the future. Her family's the past. My phone blew up. Investors media. My brothers begging for damage control. I silenced it and booked a flight to Bali. Let them sweat. The game had changed, and for the first time I held the cards. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and old money. I'd chosen the Carter Enterprises boardroom, deliberately the same space where 3 years earlier my father had laughed off my proposal to digitize our supply chain. Now the $200 million valuation of Novamind hung in the air like a challenge etched in neon. My family arrived one by one. Matthew in his usual Brioni suit, James checking his Rolex, my mother clutching her Hermes clutch like a shield. My father entered last, his posture rigid, the same way he'd stood at my college graduation when I'd rejected his offer to join the family business outright. Let's make this quick, Matthew snapped, sliding into the chair beside the $15,000 espresso machine they'd bought to impress European clients. I've got a merger call in 20 minutes. I waited until the door clicked shut. You don't, I cancelled it. His head jerked up. You what? You'll want to hear this. I tapped the tablet in front of me, pulling up the slides I'd prepared. The screen behind me lit up with 2 columns. Carter Enterprises revenue, 300 meters versus Novamind valuation. 200 meters, the valuation number pulsed red. My father's jaw tightened. Is this a PowerPoint coup, Violet? It's a reality check. I stood, my black Stella McCartney pantsuit swallowing the light. You have 2 choices. 1, I return as CEO of Carter Enterprises with full voting rights and a 51% stake in the tech division. 2, I take Novamind public next quarter and watch your stock price crater when Stratus Corp cancels their $40 million annual contract. James snorted. You're bluffing. Stratus needs us. I tapped the tablet. The screen changed to an email from Stratus's CEO. We'll follow Violet wherever she goes. The room went still. My mother's clutch hit the table with a muffled thud. You'd sabotage your own family. Matthew's voice shook. You did that when you cut me from the $120 million trust. I said, colder than I felt. When you let Claire humiliate me at your wedding. When you treated my $40 million in tech revenue like a hobby. My father finally spoke. His voice graveled with something like grief. We protected you. The boardroom eats visionaries alive. Funny. I swiped to the next slide, a leaked internal memo showing Carter Enterprises' 19% decline in market share since I left. Looks like I'm not the one being eaten. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere below, taxis honked on Park Avenue, oblivious to the dynasty unraveling 30 stories up. The breaking point. James slammed his fist on the table, making the water glasses jump. This is blackmail. It's business, I corrected. The kind you taught me. Do we have a deal? My father leaned forward, his Rolex catching the light. And if we refuse? I met his gaze, the same steel grey eyes I'd inherited. Then I walk, and I take the $150 million Stratus deal with me. Your shareholders will dump your stock by noon. Matthew laughed high and brittle. You'd never do it. You're still the same little girl who cried when Mom forgot your ballet recital. The barb landed sharp and precise. I remembered that day, 12 years old, waiting in a pink tutu as my parents' plane sat grounded in Tokyo, tending to a critical acquisition I'd sworn. Then I'd never let their neglect break me again. Wrong, I said, voice steady. That girl died when you voted me out of the trust. The woman she became doesn't beg. She builds. My mother reached for my hand. Violet, please, we're family. I pulled back. Families don't steal $25 million in seed money. They don't leak emails to sabotage their daughter's IPO. The screen flashed the damning message my father had sent the board. Violet's project is a liability. My father paled. Where did you? Stratus's legal team found it during due diligence. I stood my chair screeching, sign the papers, or I walk. The silence that changed everything. For 97 seconds I counted, no one spoke. My father stared at the memo, his shoulders sagging. Matthew picked at his cufflinks, the ones I'd bought him for his graduation. James glared at the table as if it had betrayed him. Finally, my father rasped, We'll need 72 hours to consult the board. I gathered my tablet. You have 24. The Wall Street Journal runs my exit interview at noon tomorrow. Violet, my father's voice stopped me at the door. Was it worth it burning us down? I turned hand on the brass handle. You taught me. Fire purges. Weakness. Thank you for the lesson. The elevator ride down felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls showed no trace of the woman who'd once shrunk to fit this family's expectations. Somewhere between the leaked email and the $200 million valuation, I'd outgrown them. Key details and citations from search results. The confrontation occurs in the family's Manhattan boardroom, mirroring past power imbalances. Violet leverages her $200 million valuation and the $150 million Stratus deal as bargaining chips. The leaked email exposing her father's sabotage resurfaces, destroying his moral high ground. Dialogue, you taught me fire purges weakness, encapsulates her transformation from victim to strategist. Financial figures, $120 million trust, $40 million revenue, anchor the stakes in tangible consequences. This scene crystallizes Violet's shift from marginalized daughter to equal power player, using cold logic and hard numbers to dismantle systemic disrespect, a reckoning years in the making. The day Novamind hit a $500 million valuation, I stood on the rooftop of my Tribeca office, watching the Hudson River carve its path through the city. Below, my team celebrated with champagne and laughter, a stark contrast to the silent, guilt-edged dinners of my childhood. I'd chosen this life, a boardroom of strangers who became family, a company built on code and conviction rather than legacy. Yet the ghost of my father's voice still whispered in rare, unguarded moments, You'll regret turning your back on us. Regret, I've learned, is a shapeshifter. It visits as a flicker of guilt when my mother's birthday passes unacknowledged, or when I see Matthew's face in a Wall Street Journal article about Carter Enterprises' declining market share. But it never stays. Not when I remember the trust document with my name scratched out in blue ink, or the $25 million I clawed back from their coffers to fund my freedom. Last month I received a letter from James. Not an email. A handwritten note on Crane & Co. stationery, smudged with what might have been whiskey or tears. We're selling the Park Avenue tower, Dad's retiring. He wants to see you. I burned the letter in my office fireplace, watching the flames lick at the word wants, needs, demands, expects. The Carters had always spoken in verbs that bound. Now the ashes smelled like closure. The unanswered questions. At a women's leadership conference in Austin, a young founder asked me during a Q&A, How do you stop craving approval from people who hurt you? The audience leaned forward, pens hovering. I thought of Claire's wedding. The the hum of condescension in her voice when she thanked me for being flexible. You don't stop craving it, I said. You outgrow it. One day you realize their validation is a currency that doesn't spend in your new world. Later, over tequila cocktails, she pressed further. But what if they're your family? Don't you owe them something? I spun my glass, watching the ice cubes fracture the light I used to think family meant obligation. Now I know it's a choice. I choose people who see my worth without an audit. The boundaries that set me free. Building a life untethered from the Carter name required ruthless boundaries. No to my brother's request for advice on their flailing tech division. No to my mother's plea to mediate Christmas dinner. Yes to therapy, to unraveling why I once equated love with financial utility. The hardest no came last year. My father showed up unannounced at Novamind's headquarters, his once imposing frame diminished by time and pride. The receptionist called me bewildered. There's a Mr. Carter here. He says he's your... I know who he is. I met him in the lobby, my Louboutins, clicking a deliberate rhythm against the marble. He looked at the Forbes cover framed on the wall, my face beside the headline, "The Billion-Dollar Daughter Who Rewrote the Rules." You've done well, he said, the closest he'd ever come to praise. I have. A beat of silence. The man who'd once reduced empires to balance sheets fumbled for words. The board. They'd listen if you came back. We could merge the companies. I smiled calm as the eye of a storm. I don't need a merger, I need peace, and you can't negotiate for that. The invitation to the reader. Here's what no one tells you about building your own table. The chairs are often empty at first. You'll question if you belong there, if the world will ever stop measuring your worth in the language of your past. But slowly you fill the seats with those who speak your new dialect, respect, reciprocity, resolve. So I ask you, when the people who named you insist on mispronouncing your value, do you correct them or write a new dictionary? Is forgiveness a gift you give others or a treaty you sign with your own scars? How much of yourself would you surrender to be loved? And when does the cost bankrupt your soul? There are no universal answers, only the quiet calculus we perform in midnight moments. For me, the equation balanced when I realized a legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you refuse to carry forward. The last page. I'm writing this from a villa in Santorini where the Aegean Sea stretches endless and unconcerned with human drama. Novamind runs smoothly, in my absence, a testament to teams built on trust, not blood. My phone buzzes, another interview request, a philanthropist seeking partnership, a TED Talk invitation. I let it ring. The horizon blurs where sky meets water, a line as fluid as the boundaries we draw between loyalty and self-respect. Somewhere beyond it, my family's empire shrinks in the rear view, a silhouette against the dawn of what I've built. What will you choose to leave behind? And what will you dare to create from the ashes of others' expectations? The sun rises, the waves answer for no one,